5, 4, 3, 2.
I could see the color drain from his face as he was realizing what I was telling him. And that was the first moment I thought, okay, maybe we're in some trouble here.
We ended up like going through IVF. The hardest part of this was like the isolation that you feel. You feel like you're broken.
I'm sitting there with my baby, just crying, being like, what happened to my life here? I was so mad.
She looked at me and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, I'm so sorry. We don't see a heartbeat.
I find it really rare that someone's expectation of motherhood matches the real thing, whether that's how you conceive, if you like being pregnant, if you like being a mom at all. Steph, how did your conception match how you thought it would play out?
To be clear, there wasn't supposed to be any conception. Okay, I was on the pill. And I also took an emergency contraceptive.
Oh.
So some pharmaceutical review would be fantastic. But I really wasn't expecting it. I was going for a pelvic ultrasound one day, and every time I had gone for one prior, they ask you if you're pregnant, and most times I just answer no. And for some reason on this day, I was like, you know what, let me just double check. And so I grabbed the pregnancy test, and I have to say I was thrilled. I was like, okay, great. I was done university, the student loans were paid off. Those were the two prerequisites. I think a lot of people are like, I want to be married, I was like, am I done university, and are the loans paid off? So I was thrilled. I put the 3 pregnancy tests that I took in a bag. I bought a little onesie, and I wrote a 4-page letter to my daughter's dad, and I invited him over, and I remember like recording, thinking, we're gonna go viral. Influencers. And I could see the color drain from his face as he was realizing what I was telling him. And that was the first moment I thought, okay, maybe we're in some trouble here. And to be fair, the guy was 23 years old. I was 24. So I think I should have allowed him a little bit more grace. But nothing about the pregnancy was the way that I imagined it to be in my mind. I remember the next day getting a text message from him that said, I don't think that you should go through with this, and getting a sinking feeling in my stomach, and all of the confidence and the excitement that I had eradicated, like just completely disappeared. So for the next few weeks, I ended up going back and forth in my mind. And my parents were hugely supportive during this time. I have to give it to them. I had booked an appointment at a clinic, and I went into the clinic, and I remember sitting down and looking around and being really taken aback at the variety of women that I saw in there. There were younger women, there were older women, there were women that were there with their partners, there were women that were there with their kids. And I thought to myself, everybody is in here because they feel like they need to be for whatever reason. And I just don't know that that's the case for me. So I got up and I went to the woman at the reception desk and I said, can I go? Can I leave? And she was like, of course you can. And so I said, Mom, let's go. And I remember her saying, wait, do you want your $60 back? And I thought, diapers. Look, I've made a lot of not so sound decisions in my life, but something just gave me the confidence to go through with it. And I think that walking out of the clinic that day was the best decision for me. But I think about the other women that were in the clinic that day often, and about how difficult or maybe how easy of a decision it might have been. But I think all of that just speaks to how unexpected your journey can be.
Definitely.
And your journey, Victoria, was unexpected. You didn't want kids at first, right?
I didn't want any kid. I was like married. We got married when we were like in our 20s, and we were like, yeah, we're not going to have kids because why? Why? We don't see the reason why we're going to be having kids. And suddenly I turned 30 and it's like, you know what? I think I do want at least one kid. And my husband was on board. It's like, oh, okay, sure, this is a change of plans, but yeah, let's do it. Like, we're here together. But it wasn't as easy as we thought that it was going to be. So we started like trying, and the recommendation is go for a year. We didn't expect the whole year, but almost. And then we ended up like going through IVF, and the hardest part of this was like the isolation that you feel because you don't know what's going on with you. You feel like you are broken. Yeah. And the other part is like you listen to all these pregnancies announcements. I feel it. I'm talking about it and I'm feeling it now again. And you want to be happy for everybody else, but at the same time, you start like questioning yourself again, like what is going on with me? I eat healthy. I do my exercises. I do everything that I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm not getting pregnant. And then when we had a miscarriage, and we didn't tell that to anybody because I was already broken. So it's been a journey since we started this, but then one day we had like the happy news that this transfer worked, and that's the happiest day of my life. After a miscarriage, you feel like you do not need to be that happy because you don't know what's going to happen in the next few weeks, but then like the joy starts like build up, and it's amazing, but completely not what I was planning to be for a pregnancy or for my journey. I think like the whole thing was kind of robbed the joy for the whole process. It was like not what I was planning.
Sabrina, with your third pregnancy, you say that you fell through the medical system. What happened?
Yeah, so I had our first, and then I had our second, and kind of I gave birth to our second, and right in that moment I was like, I'm not done. Like I want a third, I knew. And so we kind of went about that process, not immediately, obviously, but like after some time. And you know, you're third-time parents and you've gone through it twice, so you're pretty confident. You feel like, oh, I know what's going on. I don't need to stress. So we're going through the whole motions. I got pregnant. Fairly normal pregnancy, nothing that would have suggested anything was wrong. And then the day before my scheduled C-section, I started having some signs of labor. And I'd been told this might happen, just go to the hospital. So we called in and we drove to the hospital. I can actually still remember the spot on the QEW where we settled on her name, because we were like waiting to the last minute. So I still like drive by that, I remember. And we got to the hospital and I was feeling like these kind of stretches or whatever. And I had been told any movement's good movement. In fact, my OB had said, it's going to be more it's less kung fu, more yoga now. So I was like, okay, we're good. And so we went up and, you know, they have these little like circular monitors and then they squeeze the gel on you. And also the gel never seems to be enough. They're always like struggling to squeeze it. So they're squeezing the gel on me and they're putting these monitors. And I like see out of the corner of my eye, the screen says low battery, no detection. And so I'm like, okay, well, she's like, I'm going to change the battery, still kind of chill. Then they're looking for the baby's heartbeat with a Doppler. And that's when, you know, that feeling inside of your chest starts to tighten and you start to become aware of what's going on. And so they can't find the baby's heartbeat. But then all of a sudden someone goes, oh, there it is. And then they go, oh no, that's the mother's.
Oh God.
And so you're just like this. And then I'm like, oh God. And I remember hearing in my head, not this, please not this, please not this. And I remember they wheeled in like an ultrasound eventually, and a doctor came in and she did the ultrasound, like a bedside one, and she looked at me and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, I'm so sorry. We don't see a heartbeat. 2 days before the baby had been there, somehow in that day, she was not. And in that moment, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to deliver this baby, this full-term baby. So it was just like, I call it a trapdoor moment where you just free fall, right? And so we went through the motions, and on the day of the C-section, I delivered our baby girl, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. And they say to you, you should hold her, because they have learned over time that that helps you process, women process the grief. So you're holding this baby, you see yourself in her. And so we're there and you're hearing other cries, and eventually, you know, I had still had a C-section, I was healing. We were able to leave. We went home, and it was at that moment that I would say I was forgotten. My OB had been on vacation, and they were like, he's gonna call you right away, like when he's back, to make sure. Didn't get a call the next day, didn't get a call the day after. So I pick up the phone and I call him. He'll call me back. He does call me back, and I can tell he's called me from his car. And first thing he says is, I'm so sorry. I was at Turk's. And I was like, okay. And then Second thing he says is, oh, I totally jinxed you. And I just like freeze. I'm like, are you kidding me? The conversation carried on, and at one point I was like, well, where is she? Because I didn't bring my baby home. Like, because now you need to think about funeral arrangements. And he didn't know her gender. He didn't know her name. His response was, oh, the neonate. Let me look into where she is. So that was the reaction there. I wrote him a letter as soon as I hung up the phone, and I said to him, I understand you can get desensitized by your job, but this was not just a stillbirth. This was a daughter to me. This was a grandchild to my parents. This was my kid's first experience with the loss of a family member. And for you to be so cavalier about it is unacceptable. And he called me like 2 seconds in getting the note. More than that, though, nobody checked in on me. When you have a baby, you go to these wellness checks, and in these wellness checks, they say to you, well, how are you? Are you having the baby blues? Are you okay? But nobody did that. So then when I had to reach out to my doctor, I had to seek that out myself. And I was blanketed and surrounded by a community that cared for me and carried me through all of it. But what I'm concerned about is the women who aren't, because who is at a higher risk of postpartum depression than the woman who gave birth but didn't bring the baby home? Mm-hmm. Like, to me, if that's not falling through the cracks of the medical system, then I don't know what else is.
I'm sorry that you had to go through that, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
I hope it can be helpful to other people.
She was not a neonate. What?
No.
Can I ask what her name was?
Of course. Her name was Henrietta. Henrietta Rada Aida Ceccarelli. And you know what? My kids talk about her freely and openly. We have a plant. They tell us it's Henrietta's plant. And she lives on. And talking about her, I love talking about her. So if you ever meet someone who's gone through child loss, asking them what the name is and stuff, it's so healing. So thank you for asking.
Of course. You shared a bit about your early days, and every set of early days looks different. Steph, what do you remember about the early days of bringing your baby home?
When I think back to that time, I was navigating so much because, as I mentioned, I was 25 when I had her. So as much as I thought at the time, I've got this all figured out, I think motherhood is something that nobody has figured out, no matter how old you are when it happens. But I was struggling with a lot just in terms of the many different directions that my life was starting to take. But I do recall experiencing a lot with my daughter's dad that made things extra difficult. This may sound vain, but my self-esteem plummeted after having my daughter. I was very accustomed to looking a certain way my entire life. And then I got pregnant, and that changed. I had put on 40 pounds. I had the best boobs I've ever had in my life, I'll tell you that.
Those don't last.
They did not. I've never had them again, which is neither here nor there. But one thing that I experienced which made things very, very difficult was I found some inappropriate texts in my daughter's dad's phone. And this was within 3 months of having her. So we just bought a house together. I've just given birth. I'm trying to get this weight off, and he's texting another woman. And I remember immediately turning inward and thinking, is this my fault? What am I doing wrong? In retrospect, the answer was nothing.
Well, you're so vulnerable. You must have been so vulnerable.
I was, because the other thing is you are financially dependent on your partner at this time.
That's right.
So I'm trying to, I went from 0 to 100. I'm like, okay, what is my next move here? I was raised in a household with 2 parents that said, don't ever let anybody treat you like a second-class citizen. And it was giving second-class citizen. And I thought, okay, do I stay? Do I go? And trying not to be hasty and understanding that not only was I making a decision for me, but also my child.
Yes. And you're young.
And I'm young,
You're
right?
super young.
So I don't have the financial means to be on my own. And I said, okay, you know what? I'm gonna work on this. Let me see if I can work on this. And we tried for another few months, and then it happened again. And I thought, I am out. And I had gone back to work, and I started putting what Caribbean people call vex money. Started putting that money aside, and I was like, I'm out of here. And I was able to move out and get my own place a few months later. But I didn't want to stick around for whatever else was coming because I'm looking at the pattern here, and it's not looking good. So I left, and I think in the months immediately following that, I always questioned whether or not I made the right thing. But being 5-6 years out, I know that I did exactly what I needed to do.
And the example you set for your daughter, right?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
one of the things that you and I have in common is that we both experienced a lot of anger in those early days.
Yes.
What was that like for you?
So yeah, there was a lot of anger, definitely. And one of the things that I remember all the time that I know that I don't have to say this, but I love my mom and I love all the support that she gave to me and all that.
I feel like we all know where this
Yes. But when I was just maybe a few weeks, maybe I think it was a week after I had my kid, I was like not sad, but I was angry. Like there was a lot of anger, and I was angry that things were not done the way that I supposed to be doing them, because whatever I was breastfeeding or any other thing that I was doing for my newborn. And the comment that I received from my mom was like, why are you angry? Why are you complaining if you wanted this? So, and that made me cry inside. I didn't cry outside because I was too angry to cry, but inside I remember that I was like, okay, so I shouldn't be complaining about this because I went through an IVF, I went through a miscarriage, I went through all this, and now I have my baby, so I was actually looking for this, so I have to suck it up. And it's not. You shouldn't be like treated like that. And people, especially your family, should be supportive of everything, all your feelings. You have to feel validated, especially on those moments.
I remember I was just so mad that this is what my life looked like. It's like, was no one gonna tell me this isn't blissful? I remember we had a little, we're renting a condo and being up high, looking down, it was springtime, seeing all the little people living their lives, going to bars, and that had been me 2 days earlier. And I'm sitting there with my baby, just crying, being like, what happened to my life here? I was so mad, and I don't think anyone prepares you for how sleep drunk you feel. I was weepy at all times because I would get anxiety when the sun went down because I had no idea what the nighttime would bring. I remember just putting my kid, when I couldn't get him to stop crying, putting him in the car and just doing laps of downtown Toronto and hitting drive-through after drive-through after drive-through and just crying the entire time because I'm like, does no one in my life see what I'm going through? And I was breastfeeding, so it really did feel like all me. But I was also just so mad that what I had been sold wasn't what I was experiencing. Like I thought, I don't know if you had this mat leave experience, I thought mat leave was gonna be blissed out and cuddly, and I was gonna have warm cups of coffee and my hair would be blowing like a detergent commercial. I was so bored. I was so angry. I was so resentful. What was your mat leave?
There was nothing that I was looking forward to more than mat leave because, like I said, I had just graduated. So I was working. I would do one job from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., take a 1 hour break, and then work from 4 to midnight. Because again, I had to get the student loans paid off so I could move on with my life.
Get that.
So I'm thinking about this promised land of mat leave, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna watch Lifetime movies. My house is gonna be so clean. I'm gonna join the mommy and me classes. That is not what it was. It was, I was so unstimulated. It was just pee and puke and poop everywhere. And
Make sure you count them.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I had a good baby. She wasn't colicky. She slept through the night. Like she slept, she ate, she pooped. But that was what my life felt like. And coming from being someone who's very social, I loved to be stimulated. I needed some intelligent conversation, and I was just getting none of that. So I ended up going back to work way early, just to kind of keep my foot in the door, not only professionally, but also in terms of my identity. I really needed to just have something to hold on to remind myself that I am still a person, I'm still a woman outside of this.
It does feel in a way like we really prepare for the wrong things. Like I think about the prenatal class that I took. I can Google how to swaddle. What I would have preferred is a couples therapist to tell me you are gonna hate your husband and you might worry about divorce.
And he might text other women.
He might. A pelvic floor physio or some sort of doctor or medical professional to tell me what would happen to me. And instead you're teaching me how to swaddle? Like, do you feel like we prepare for the wrong things?
100%. Like, how many million Instagram accounts are there about how to have a natural birth? Does anyone plan, like we over prepare for this moment in time that is your birth, that you're not gonna talk about after the kid's won. Except for those women who didn't have epidurals and had natural birth. They're still talking about it. And we under-prepare for what is life like? What is your life like with a baby? So when are you going to get your eyebrows started after you give birth? I walked around with one eyebrow for a good 6 months. But you can't shower without a baby. You are, if you're breastfeeding or trying to breastfeed, you are tethered to that child on a cycle that first is on demand and then goes to every 3 hours. But still, try going through that cycle. We don't teach women. We should be making online groceries that we set up on intervals. There should be books telling us how to do this. There should be books telling us the operations management of life with a baby so that you're not stressed on a day-to-day level. But we don't do it.
I also found that, not that I was a single mom immediately after having her, but having to make that transition from dual parent household to single parent household, there were no resources for me. Not in how to manage this on your own, not on what resources were available in my community, not financial resources, not, you know, and this is for someone who has an education and I have a support system, but what about the women that don't? So just, really missing the mark on what really matters for women immediately after having kids.
Do you guys remember one little thing in those early days that brought you comfort or brought you joy?
My favorite one is I remember at some point the baby farting and then getting startled by her own fart, being scared and then crying. It was just the silliest, stupidest little thing, but we would crack up so hard.
It's a delight.
Everything. It was hilarious. My kids are gonna love that story. For sure.
What about you guys?
Well, for me, it was the first cup of coffee that I had in the morning because I knew I had a colicky baby. So that was another level. I learned that later. I thought that all babies were like that because I was never around babies in my whole life. So for me, it was oh my God, how women are still having these creatures. But then I learned that it was my baby, that it was a colicky baby. So that first cup of coffee that I knew that it was the only one that I was going to have without the baby screaming his lungs out because of he was colicky in the morning at 6:30 a.m. in the morning. That was the only one, and that was the joy of my day.
Sacred. I feel like I can taste it.
Yes.
I know that
exactly.
joy. I know it.
For me, it was the amount of visits that I got. I felt like a socialite. Whatever I was missing from mat leave in terms of the intellectual conversations and whatnot, I will say my support system, and I think I also have a heightened appreciation for my support system just hearing so many stories today. People were coming to visit. They were really intentional about coming to visit. So that was really nice. And the boobs. All goes back to the boobs.
I take back my answer. It's the boobs.
The boobs for you too.
Yeah.
Boobs and coffee.
There we go. Well, and I'll throw in chocolate. I just remember my mom, probably for the first month, would come every day. She'd take the train. Every day she'd stop at Union Station, visit a specific bakery, and get these chocolate croissants. And we would split it and we would just sit. And sometimes we wouldn't even talk.
Yep.
Sometimes I would cry and say, why do I feel like this? Is he ever gonna sleep? Am I ever gonna sleep? Sometimes I would take a shower. And it was just, that was magic.
Yep.